So my name is Limbo. I'm 56 years old. I've been in the United States for um, 43 years. I first got here when I was 13 years old, and I've loved it ever since.
We met up in Spokane, Washington. He was, back in 1988, he was in the Air Force at the time. He's actually getting ready, transitioning out of the Air Force, head back to his home state of California.
You know, in the Philippines, we had a different perception of what life was like in the United States. You know, before I came here, I spent the whole summer in the Philippines. But when I arrived here, summer was just beginning, so I got to enjoy another months of summer vacation. But in the meantime, in between those, we didn't really know anybody. So we visited a lot of my mom's friends. We stayed in our apartment, and we enjoyed a lot of the foods that we didn't have in the Philippines, like fruits, like apples and oranges and grapes. And so those were a lot of things that we did.
When Dad and I are together, we would talk about many things. And every now and then we would talk about the Philippines. And Dad would tell me about his life in the Philippines, where he was born, where he grew up in, who he grew up with. He even talks about things he used to do in the Philippines and how coming to America changed his life.
His life story he shared with me from when he started out in the Philippines, coming to the United States, becoming a naturalized citizen, and I mean, he loved the United States. Even when he was in the Philippines, the Americans were, the military was very prominent in the Philippines, in the U.S. military. They did a lot of good, and he admired that, and he wanted to serve as well. So when he came to the United States and became a naturalized citizen, one of his goals, yes, was to get into the military.
My whole family growing up in the Philippines is military oriented. My grandfather served in the military, my uncle served in the military, and I've always admired the military occupation. Even as a kid, growing up, we watched a lot of the American World War II movies and TV shows, and it just inspired me and motivated me that I knew whether it's going to be in the Philippines or in the United States, that I was going to be in the military.
I feel very proud. Dad has worked really hard his whole life, and I'm proud at all of his accomplishments.
So I met Ed Limbo about 20 or so, maybe 20 years ago, when we signed up for officer candidate school. So that's the first time that I met Ed Limbo. We were in OCS class 45, and we started off at Camp Mabry, and that's how we first met. So we went through the OCS class together. We were class 45, the Rough Riders, and so I got to know Ed through the OCS process, through the many long IDT periods where we were being smoked and went through all that stuff together. But I really got to know Ed when he invited us over to his house out in Elgin, or Bastrop, Elgin area, to do a planning for the following IDT weekend. So I got to meet not only Ed, but his wife Sherry, and also the kids, and I got to see how Ed was just fiercely family-oriented, and not only family-oriented, but he loved his country, and you could just tell that about him.
Being a military spouse, being a spouse in general is challenging, but being a military spouse can be difficult in the sense you have to deal with some things that are outside the norm of a traditional husband and wife. You have to deal with deployments. Life doesn't stop just because your spouse isn't there because they're deployed. Life still goes on. So you have to still raise the kids, go to work, do the things you normally do. So it adds a lot of stress at times. And so it's really important to always have the communication going and have the strong relationship and understand that it's only temporary. that it will get back to a so-called norm once the soldier or the sailor returns home. So for me, it was difficult at times, especially when September 11th happened, and then we had the deployments after that. And he served he's been on several combat tours, being an infantry officer. So it was scary. I think one of the most scariest moments was with the military. What they do is they have a pre-deployment ceremony and then a ceremony when they come home. And the pre-deployment is pretty much to kind of get everything in line and in order. So you have to make sure that the last will and testament is written. So he had to make sure he had his will in line and that we had everything in agreement. And one of the interesting things and one of the kind of scary things is it does become kind of a somber time, because there's a time when they let the families know, the spouses know of the soldiers, that should anything happen to your soldier when he's deployed, you already know who's going to come visit you to let you know if something's happened to your soldier, because you're already introduced to that person before they ever get deployed. Before your soldier leaves, you've already met the chaplain or the officer, whoever's going to come and deliver you the news that your soldier has either been injured or killed. So that puts a somber moment on everything, because it brings a lot of reality right in your face, right? It's something you don't expect to hear and you don't ever want to hear. And the fact that they make sure you know that this is going to be the point of contact, it is kind of scary, because you don't ever want to see that person coming down your driveway.
There were times, I think, where I was nervous and unsure of what was going on, because when he was deployed while I was in high school, we didn't have the instant connection you have today. We would use Skype, and it was only on his terms when he could call in. So I think just not knowing when you were going to get a call and what that call could be was a little nerve-wracking at times.
Ed was great, though. He always encouraged me, and he always said, God has a plan for you and God has a will for you, and just see it through. And so he was such an encouragement to me during this time period. And if there's anything that I can say about Ed, one thing is, first and foremost, he loves this country. He loves his family, and he is such an encourager for his friends. And if it weren't for his pep talks and his encouragement, I don't know if I would have made it through. And it's not solely him, it was other people, but he was such a blessing to my life, and he still is to this day.
He was also a hero to not only to our country, but to me and my siblings. We used to have these sweaters with a picture of us and Dad, and it would say my dad, my hero, because that's what he was. That's what it was to us. My dad will always be my hero and my inspiration, and that's never going to change.
Don't give up. Never give up your dream. Always have a goal. Always aspire to be something. Never settle for anything less than what's great, what's best for you. You're never too old to learn. Try to achieve, small achievements at a time if you can. When I got my associate's degree, it took me 2 years to do that. But it took me 12 years to get my bachelor's degree, taking one class at a time and working full time. And eventually I got it. It took me 12 years. But once I did that, I wasn't satisfied with that. I wanted to get my master's degree. But it took me another 10 years to get my master's degree, because the opportunity just wasn't there.